I don't remember who gasped first, the priest, the neighbor beside me, or me. But the sound cut through the heavy silence of the funeral like shattered glass. My hands trembled as I stared down at the glowing screen of my phone. The message clear, undeniable, impossible. I'm alive. The coffin lay before me, draped in black cloth and surrounded by white chrysanthemums. Candles flickered, shadows dancing on the pale wood. The scent of incense clung to my lungs, suffocating. For hours, I had tried to convince myself that this was real, that my husband, David, was gone. That the man I had loved, fought with, forgiven too many times, was lying cold inside that box. But then, that message appeared. I clutched the phone tightly, as if the screen might slip away and erase the words. As if admitting what I saw would make me lose my mind. I glanced around at the mourners, David's elderly parents sobbing into each other's shoulders. My sister holding my arm tightly, neighbors whispering prayers. They were grieving a man who, according to this message, had staged the entire charade. My heart pounded so violently I could barely hear the priest's steady chanting. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone against the floor and demand someone open the coffin. My throat burned with the words that clawed their way up. He's not dead. But instead, I swallowed them. I told myself, not here. Not now. They'll think you're insane. Wait. The message blinked again. Another vibration. I flinched, fumbling to unlock the screen. Don't say anything. Play along. I'll explain later. My vision blurred. The letters swam across the screen as my body shook with both rage and disbelief. He was alive. He was watching. And the first, his wife, was the puppet forced to grieve in front of a community while he manipulated everything from the shadows. I sat frozen, every nerve in my body screaming. My hand trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. But I slipped it into my lap, hiding it beneath the folds of my black dress. My chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. I whispered to myself so softly no one could hear, "David, what have you done?" The truth is, David and I had not been a fairy tale couple for years. Outwardly, people believed we were stable, enviable even. He was charming when he wanted to be, always knowing the right words to win over friends and relatives. He could smile at a stranger in the supermarket and make them feel like they had known him for years. That charisma was what had drawn me to him when I was 23, a young receptionist just trying to survive in the city. But behind closed doors, the man I married became someone else. It began subtly comments about my spending, the way I folded laundry, the friends I kept. I told myself it was normal, that marriage required compromise, that maybe I was just too sensitive. But then it grew. He controlled the bank accounts, criticized how I dressed, demanded I quit my evening classes because a wife didn't need those things. He never raised a fist. But his control was a vice tightening each year, suffocating me. And yet I stayed. Because I believed I loved him. Because I was afraid of leaving with nothing. Because every time I thought of escaping, he dangled promises of change, of building our future together. We had debts. That was the truth. His business ventures failed repeatedly, leaving us scraping together bills. I worked 2 jobs at one point, waitressing at night after my day job. While he claimed to be chasing the next big deal, the last one had drained us completely, a failed import company. Boxes of unsold electronics still cluttering our garage. Insurance had always been his obsession. I can still hear his voice, low and insistent, whispering in the dark of our bedroom, "You don't understand, Emma. Insurance is the safety net of life. One good policy and we're free. We won't have to worry anymore." At the time, I thought it was just one of his fantasies, another scheme he would talk about and then forget. I had no idea how far he would go. At the funeral, I could barely keep my composure. The priest's voice droned on as I sat stiffly, feeling the eyes of the mourners on me, the grieving widow. I dabbed at my eyes with a tissue, not out of sorrow, but to disguise the fury and confusion burning inside me. I replayed the last week in my head, the accident that had supposedly claimed his life. A car found wrecked near the river, his body supposedly mangled beyond recognition. The police had confirmed it was him, based on ID and fragments of clothing. There had been a closed casket, a recommendation from officials that the family should not see. I had believed them. I had mourned him. I had signed the papers. And yet here he was, texting me from God knows where. My sister leaned closer, squeezing my hand. "You're shaking," she whispered. Worry etched across her face. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a weak smile. My throat felt like sandpaper. But I wasn't fine. My life had just been ripped apart in the most grotesque way possible. The service ended, people rose to pay their final respects, and I moved like a sleepwalker through the motions. My phone vibrated again. I dared not look until I slipped into the corner of the corridor outside, away from the crowd. "Meet me tonight. Don't tell anyone. 11 p.m. our old spot." I nearly laughed, hysterical, bitter. Our old spot. The lakeside park where we used to go when we first dated. The nerve of him. I wanted to scream. To march into the hall and shout the truth to everyone. But the lawyer's words echoed in my head from just days ago. "Once the insurance claim is processed, the funds will be significant. You'll be financially secure." If this was fraud, then I was standing at the center of a crime I hadn't asked to join, and yet needed to know. That night, I couldn't breathe until I reached the park. The lake shimmered under the half-moon, its surface rippling with faint light. I wrapped my coat tightly around me, each crunch of gravel beneath my boots echoing like thunder in the silence. And then I saw him. He stepped out of the shadows, alive, very much alive. David. His hair was a little longer, his face thinner, but his smirk, that infuriating confident smirk, was exactly the same. "Emma," he said, as if we were meeting after work, as if nothing had happened. "You came." I staggered backward, one hand pressed against my chest. You're alive." "My God, David, you're alive." My voice cracked. "Keep it down." He glanced around, his eyes darting nervously. "Yeah, I'm alive. And if you don't want to go to jail too, you'll listen to me carefully." I froze. "Jail? What the hell are you talking about? Everyone thinks you're dead." I buried an empty coffin. He sighed as though I were being unreasonable. "It's not empty. Don't worry about that detail. What matters is this. We're going to be rich, Emma. The insurance payout is going to save us. This is our chance. A fresh start." My stomach lurched. I stared at him, bile rising in my throat. "You staged your own death. For money. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To your parents? To everyone." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "It's temporary. Once the money clears, I'll disappear officially. New identity, new life. You'll get your share and you can start over. Or, if you're stubborn, you can go back to your pathetic jobs and debts. But if you open your mouth now, Emma, you go down with me. You've signed the claim paperwork. You're part of it." His words were knives. And the worst part, they cut with truth. I backed away, tears stinging my eyes. But anger surged hotter. "You bastard. You've ruined everything. Do you realize what will happen if people find out? They'll lock you up. And maybe me too. How dare you drag me into this?" David's eyes narrowed, his tone shifting from coaxing to threatening. "Think carefully. You've always wanted freedom, security. This is it. Don't throw it away." I wanted to scream, to slap him, to call the police right then and there. But my body shook with fear. Fear of prison, fear of shame, fear of losing what little I had left. He leaned in closer, his breath hot against my ear. "Play the grieving widow. Collect the payout. Then we're both free." I stood rigid, my fists clenched, my heart hammering in my chest. For a long moment, I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Finally, I whispered, "You're insane." But even as I said it, his words echoed in my mind, poisonous and inescapable. That night, I returned home and locked the door behind me. My sister was asleep in the guest room, exhausted from helping me through the funeral. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark, staring at the stack of insurance documents on the counter. Every line, every signature felt like a trap closing in. My phone buzzed again. Another message from David, "Trust me. Just a little longer. Don't ruin this." I gripped the phone, my hands shaking. I knew one thing with absolute clarity. If I didn't act carefully, this nightmare would consume me. The question was, should I play along or should I expose him now and risk everything? As I sat there in the silence of my kitchen, the shadows thick around me, I realized the truth. No matter what I chose, my life would never be the same again. And I hadn't even discovered the worst part yet. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was a spinning wheel of fear, anger, and confusion, replaying David's smug face at the lakeside again and again. His words slithered into my thoughts like poison. You signed the paperwork. You're part of it. If I go down, you go down. By dawn. My body was stiff from sitting upright in the kitchen chair. The insurance documents still spread across the table. My sister, unaware of the storm raging inside me, emerged yawning. Her hair messy, her eyes red from grief. You didn't sleep, she whispered, pouring herself a glass of water. I forced a weak smile. I couldn't. Too much. You know? She nodded, her gaze soft. You were strong yesterday. I'm proud of you. She touched my shoulder before retreating to the guest room again. If she only knew. If anyone knew. The day passed in a blur. Relatives came to offer condolences. Neighbors delivered food. The house was filled with the murmurs of sympathy. I played my part widow, grieving, overwhelmed. But every smile, every tear I shed, felt like a lie. Inside, I was screaming. That afternoon, the insurance adjuster called. His tone was polite but formal. Mrs. Harrison, just confirming the claim is being processed. You should expect preliminary approval within 10 days. 10 days. That was all David wanted me to wait. 10 days and the money would be released. Then what? Would he vanish? Would the police knock on my door? As I thanked the adjuster and hung up, my hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I couldn't keep this secret alone. That evening, I drove across town to meet someone I trusted more than anyone else in the world. My childhood friend. Sarah. She lived in a modest house with her husband and 2 kids. When she opened the door, her eyes widened at the sight of me. Emma, she whispered, pulling me into a hug. I'm so sorry. I wanted to come yesterday, but the kids were sick. I can't believe he's gone. I swallowed hard. My chest ached with the weight of the truth pressing against my ribs. Can we talk? Privately. She frowned but led me to the back porch. We sat at the small wooden table, the air cool, the faint laughter of her children drifting from inside. I stared at my hands, twisting them in my lap. Sarah, I don't know how to say this. But David isn't dead. She blinked. What? He's alive. My voice shook. He faked the accident. He texted me. I saw him. Last night. He's alive. For a moment, she just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't form words. Then she laughed nervously, shaking her head. Emma, grief does strange things. I know you loved him, and losing him so suddenly, I'm not crazy. I snapped, slamming my palms on the table. Her eyes widened, startled. I saw him. I talked to him. He's alive, Sarah, and he's making me part of his scam. The insurance money, he wants me to collect it for him. The words spilled out of me, frantic, desperate. By the time I finished, tears blurred my vision. Sarah's expression shifted from disbelief to horror. She leaned forward, gripping my hands tightly. Oh my God, Emma! This is serious. If what you're saying is true, you can't keep quiet. This is fraud. Federal fraud. He could go to prison. And you, I know. My voice cracked. If I expose him, I go down to... He made sure of it. Sarah was silent for a long moment, her thumb brushing over my knuckles as if trying to calm me. Finally, she said, you need proof. Something that shows he orchestrated this, that you were forced. You can't just tell the police. They'll think you were in on it. You need evidence. Her words lit a spark inside me. Proof. That was the only way out. But how? The next few days, I played my role. I accepted casseroles from neighbors, spoke gently to David's grieving parents. It even attended a church memorial service in his name. All the while, I checked my phone obsessively, half expecting another message from him, half terrified it would come. And then it did. Progress. One word. That was all he sent on the 5th day. I typed back, my fingers trembling. The insurance said approval in 10 days. Nothing yet. A few seconds later, the dots appeared. Good. Keep playing your part. You're doing fine. I wanted to throw up. He sounded like a director praising his actor. I decided then I wouldn't wait for him to hand me proof. I would find it myself. That night, I returned to the park. Alone. I didn't know if he would be there, but I had to try. I carried a small voice recorder in my coat pocket, my heart hammering at the thought of catching him admitting everything. The lake was still, the air heavy with silence. I waited and waited. Hours passed, the night deepening around me. But he never came. Just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed. "What are you doing there? Are you trying to get caught?" My blood turned to ice. He was watching me, somewhere in the shadows, unseen. I spun in circles, scanning the trees, the benches, the shoreline. But I saw nothing. My phone buzzed again. "Go home, Emma. Don't do anything stupid." I stumbled back to my car, my skin crawling. He was one step ahead, always watching, always in control. But I refused to let him win. The following morning, I called Sarah from the bathroom, whispering so my sister wouldn't overhear. "He knows. He knew I was at the park last night. He's watching me." "Emma," she said, her voice urgent. "You can't keep living like this. You need to bring someone else in. A lawyer, maybe even the police. At least talk to someone who knows the law." I hesitated, my stomach twisting. If I go to the police now, I have nothing. No proof. "They'll arrest me too. Then we'll get proof," Sarah insisted. Together, her determination steadied me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel completely alone. 2 nights later, another message arrived. "Meet me tomorrow. Warehouse by the river. 9 p.m. Don't tell anyone." My pulse quickened. A warehouse. Why there? I showed the message to Sarah. She bit her lip, thinking, this could be it. He might slip up, say something incriminating. "You'll need to record it. Hide the recorder better this time. And Emma, be careful. If he suspects you're setting him up, he could." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. That night, I barely slept. My mind filled with images of the warehouse. Dark, echoing. David's face twisted in anger. His hands tightening around my throat if he discovered what I was doing. But beneath the fear, a new feeling grew. Resolve. I wasn't just a pawn in his scheme. Not anymore. The next evening, I drove to the warehouse. The river glistened nearby, moonlight flickering off its surface. The building loomed in front of me. Rusted metal siding, broken windows, graffiti scrawled across its walls. I stepped inside. The air smelled of damp concrete and old machinery. My footsteps echoed on the floor as I moved cautiously, the tiny recorder hidden deep in my coat pocket. And then, from the shadows, his voice. "Took you long enough?" David stepped forward, his smirk illuminated by the weak glow of a hanging bulb. He looked even rougher than before dark stubble. Tired eyes, but his confidence hadn't wavered. "You shouldn't have picked this place," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling inside. "On the contrary," he replied smoothly. "No one comes here. No one will hear us." "Perfect, don't you think?" He gestured toward a stack of crates, motioning for me to sit. I didn't move. "What do you want, David?" I demanded. He stepped closer, his expression hardening. "To make sure you're still on my side. That you haven't entertained other ideas." I forced myself to meet his gaze. "I'm here, aren't I?" He studied me for a long moment, then smiled thinly. "Good, because we're close, Emma. Very close. The payout is nearly ours. And when it comes, we both disappear. You'll thank me one day." My heart pounded as his words filled the air, every syllable damning him. I prayed the recorder was picking up every word. But then, suddenly, his eyes narrowed. "Why are your hands in your coat pocket?" I froze. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "What are you hiding, Emma?" For one terrible moment, I thought he knew. I thought David would rip the recorder from my pocket, smash it against the concrete floor, and leave me with nothing, no proof, no escape. Just his threats circling tighter around my neck. I forced my hands out of my coat slowly, palms open. Nothing. It's freezing in here. I was keeping them warm. His eyes scanned me, sharp and suspicious, before he finally relaxed, letting out a short laugh. "You've always been terrible at lying, Emma. Don't start now. If I didn't know you better, I'd think you were planning something." I swallowed hard, steadying my voice. "Why would I? You're my husband. I loved you. I still do." The words burned on my tongue, but I said them anyway, because survival sometimes demands sacrifice. David's expression softened slightly, the corner of his mouth curling into that familiar smirk. "That's my girl." He stepped closer, placing his hand on my cheek. I fought the urge to recoil, my stomach twisting with revulsion. "Just a few more days," he whispered. "We'll be untouchable." I nodded faintly, my heart pounding, praying the recorder captured every word. When I finally left the warehouse, the cold night air hit me like a slap. My hands shook so badly I could barely unlock my car. Once inside, I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, gasping for breath, my chest tight with both fear and relief. The recorder was still intact. His words were on it. That was my lifeline. I drove straight to Sarah's house. She opened the door in her pajamas, eyes wide with worry when she saw me. "Well, did you?" "I got it," I whispered, holding up the recorder like a sacred relic. She pulled me inside quickly, shutting the door behind us. We sat at her kitchen table, her husband asleep upstairs, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. My hands trembled as I pressed play. David's voice filled the room, echoing through the small speaker. "We're close. The payout is nearly ours. And when it comes, we both disappear." Sarah's face paled. She covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with shock. "Emma, this is it. This is what you needed. Proof?" For the first time in days, hope flickered in my chest. But then, as David's suspicious words replayed, "Why are your hands in your coat pocket?" a chill ran down my spine. He was watching me too closely. If he suspected I had betrayed him, he wouldn't just vanish. He would destroy me first. The next morning, Sarah called a lawyer she trusted, a man named James Whitmore. We met him in his downtown office, a tidy space filled with law books and framed certificates. He listened carefully as I explained everything, my voice shaking, the recorder clutched in my hands like a lifeline. When the recording ended, James leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. His eyes were sharp, calculating. "This is damning evidence," he said finally. "If what you're telling me is true, that your husband staged his death for insurance fraud, then he's facing serious federal charges. Decades in prison." My throat tightened. "And me." James's gaze softened slightly. "You signed the paperwork." "Yes. But this recording could establish coercion. That you were under duress, unaware of his full plan until after the fact. If we bring this to the authorities strategically, you could protect yourself." "Strategically," I echoed. He nodded. "If you simply walk into a police station now, they'll arrest you both. But if we hand over this recording with supporting evidence, we can negotiate your immunity in exchange for your cooperation. Then." Word immunity settled over me like a fragile blanket of safety. But then James's tone hardened. "The danger is real. If your husband suspects you're working against him, he won't hesitate to silence you. You need to be cautious, Emma. Very cautious." I nodded, my hands clammy. "I know." The next few days were a delicate dance of deception. I played the grieving widow in public, careful not to arouse suspicion. At night, I met with James and Sarah, piecing together a strategy. Gather more evidence. Document every message, every meeting, every word David said. Meanwhile, David kept texting. "Stay ready. We're almost there. Don't let anyone suspect. I'll contact you when it's time. Each." Message was a reminder that I was living inside a ticking time bomb. And then, on the 7th day, another twist came. The insurance company called. Mrs. Harrison, the adjuster, said, his voice cheerful. I'm pleased to inform you the claim has been approved. The funds will be released into your account within 48 hours. My breath caught. 48 hours. The clock had started. That evening, I met David again, this time at a motel on the outskirts of town. The place reeked of cigarettes and mildew, the neon sign outside flickering weakly. He opened the door shirtless, wearing only jeans, his hair damp from a shower. He looked relaxed, almost casual, as though he weren't a fugitive orchestrating a massive fraud. Emma, he greeted, pulling me inside. Good news, huh? We're almost rich. I stood stiffly by the door, my coat still on. The money isn't in yet, it will be. He grinned, pouring himself a drink from a bottle of cheap whiskey. And then, freedom. No more debts, no more pathetic jobs, no more begging family for scraps. Just us starting over. I clenched my fists. And your parents. Your friends. Everyone who thinks you're dead. He shrugged, sipping his drink. Collateral damage. They'll grieve, they'll move on. People always do. His callousness made my stomach churn. I glanced at the nightstand where his phone lay charging. If I could get my hands on it, maybe I could find messages, plans, contacts, more evidence. But as I stepped closer, he caught my wrist, pulling me against him. Don't overthink it, Emma. Just enjoy what's coming. His lips brushed my ear. In 2 days, we disappear. I forced myself to smile weakly, hiding the dread coiling in my chest. When I returned to Sarah's that night, I was pale, trembling. She pulled me into a hug, whispering, "You're almost through this. Just 2 more days. Then we go to the authorities." But I wasn't sure I had 2 days. Not with David watching my every move. Not with the money about to hit my account. The next morning, I awoke to another message. Meet me tomorrow night. Bring the cash. No excuses. My blood ran cold. Cash? The insurance hadn't even landed yet. He expected me to withdraw it immediately and hand it over. Sarah and James agreed. This was the moment. If I delivered the money, I would be complicit beyond denial. If I refused, he might disappear, taking the truth with him, worse, retaliate. We had to set a trap. James contacted federal investigators quietly, presenting the recording as leverage. They listened, took notes, and finally agreed. If I cooperated, they would protect me. But I had to lure David into a meeting where they could arrest him red-handed. The plan was terrifyingly simple. Tomorrow night, I would meet him with the money. The agents would be watching. If it worked, David would be caught. If it failed, I might not live to regret it. The next night arrived faster than I wanted. My hands shook as I tucked the envelope of decoy cash into my purse. My body ached with fear, every nerve on edge. Sarah hugged me tightly before I left. You can do this. You're stronger than you think. James met me in the parking lot near the warehouse, his expression grim. A team of plainclothes agents waited in unmarked vehicles, their radios crackling softly. Stay calm, James whispered. Stick to the plan. As soon as he incriminates himself, they'll move in. I nodded, my knees weak. Inside the warehouse, the same weak bulb flickered overhead. David was already there, pacing like a caged animal. When he saw me, his face lit up. Finally, did you bring it? I lifted the envelope with trembling hands. It's here. He snatched it from me, ripping it open, his eyes gleaming at the sight of the bills. Beautiful. This is it, Emma. This is freedom. My heart pounded as I whispered, You're sure no one will find out? That the police won't catch us? He laughed, shaking his head. Please, the police are idiots. They'll never know I'm alive. They'll never know we stole every penny. That was the moment. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. And then the warehouse doors burst open. FBI. Hands where we can see them. David's face went white as floodlights filled the room. He spun toward me, betrayal burning in his eyes. You, he hissed, before agents swarmed him, forcing him to the ground. I stood frozen, my body trembling as chaos erupted around me. David roared, struggling against the handcuffs, his voice echoing through the warehouse. You think this ends here, Emma? You have no idea what you've started. The sound of David's voice as the agents dragged him away still rings in my ears. You have no idea what you've started. It wasn't just a threat, was a promise. I stood frozen, my pulse racing, as the warehouse filled with shouts, the clatter of boots, the clink of handcuffs. Floodlights blazed, bouncing off the cold metal walls, casting everything in a harsh, unforgiving glow. My legs trembled beneath me. For a moment, I thought I would collapse. Then James's hand was on my shoulder. "It's over, Emma. You did it." But as I looked at David, pinned to the ground, his eyes locked on mine, I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. The agents bundled him into a van outside, his shouts echoing through the night air. I sat in James's car, my hands clasped tightly in my lap as we followed the convoy downtown. My body ached with exhaustion, but adrenaline kept me awake, alert. At the federal building, I was ushered into a sterile interview room. The walls were gray, the light too bright, the table cold beneath my trembling hands. 2 agents, 1 male, 1 female sat across from me. Their expressions were calm but firm. "Mrs. Harrison," the woman began, "first, we want to thank you. Tonight was a critical breakthrough. Your cooperation has been invaluable." I nodded weakly. Is David going to prison?" The male agent leaned forward. "We'll be charging him with insurance fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. With the evidence you provided, it's strong. But he's also hinted there may be others involved. We'll need your help piecing that together." My heart sank. "Others?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't know anything. He never told me." The female agent's voice softened. "You've been through a lot, but we need you to stay strong. If there are other players, we'll find them. For now, focus on yourself. You're safe tonight." Safe, the word felt foreign. Could I really believe it? When I returned home the next morning, Sarah was waiting with open arms. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "You're free," she whispered. "He's gone." But was I free? The following days blurred into a haze of exhaustion, fear, and constant phone calls. The media got wind of the story quickly. "Insurance scam exposed." The headlines blared. "Man fakes death in elaborate fraud scheme." Reporters camped outside my house, shouting questions when I stepped outside. "Did you know? Were you in on it?" My neighbor's eyes lingered too long, whispers spreading like wildfire. Some looked at me with pity, others with suspicion. I was either the victim or the accomplice, rarely just Emma. David's parents were the worst. They stormed into my house one evening, their grief curdling into rage. "How could you?" His mother screamed, her face streaked with tears. "How could you betray our son like this?" "I didn't betray him," I shouted back, my own tears spilling over. "He betrayed all of us. He's alive. He lied to you, to everyone." His father's eyes burned with fury. "Liar. You wanted him out of the way. You wanted the money. You set him up." Their words cut deeper than I expected. They left me shaking, sobbing on the floor after they stormed out. I wanted to scream to the world that I wasn't guilty, that I had been manipulated, threatened, trapped. But in the eyes of so many, I was already tainted. Meanwhile, David wasn't finished. From jail, he tried to reach me. Letters came, scrawled in his familiar handwriting. "Emma, you don't understand. They can't hold me forever. When I get out, we'll fix this. We can still have the life we planned. You think you're safe? You're not. You're tied to me whether you like it or not." Each letter made my skin crawl. I burned them in the fireplace, one after another. But the ashes didn't erase the words seared into my mind. One night, Sarah found me pacing in my kitchen, clutching a half-empty glass of wine. "You can't let him live rent-free in your head," she said firmly. "He's behind bars. You have to start living again." But how? How could I rebuild when the foundation of my life had been a lie? Weeks turned into months. The trial loomed ahead, a storm I couldn't escape. James prepared me for the witness stand, guiding me through questions, rehearsing my answers. "You'll be painted as either a victim or a conspirator," he warned. "The prosecution will emphasize your courage. The defense will try to drag you down with him. Stay calm, tell the truth." The recording will speak for itself. The night before the trial, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my chest tight with dread. Images of David flooded my mind, his smirk, his threats, his final words in the warehouse. "You have no idea what you've started." He was right. By exposing him, I had unleashed something bigger than I understood. The courtroom was colder than I expected. The wooden benches were hard, the air heavy with anticipation. When they brought David in, shackled and escorted by guards, my stomach flipped. He looked thinner, paler, but his eyes still burned with that same defiance. When our gazes met, he smiled. A slow, chilling smile that made my blood run cold. The trial dragged on for days. The prosecution laid out the evidence, the staged accident, the false documents, the insurance claim. The recording played aloud, David's own words echoing through the courtroom. Gasps rippled through the audience. When it was my turn on the stand, my legs trembled as I swore the oath. James gave me a reassuring nod, but the defense attorney's eyes were sharp, predatory. "Mrs. Harrison," he began, his voice smooth. "You signed the insurance paperwork, correct?" "Yes," I admitted. "And you stood to benefit financially from your husband's death, did you not?" "Yes." But he cut me off. "So the only reason you're claiming to be a victim now is because you were caught. Isn't that true?" My chest tightened, panic threatening to choke me. But then I remembered Sarah's words, "You're stronger than you think." I straightened my spine. No, that's not true. I was manipulated. I was threatened. I feared for my life. And when I realized what he was doing, I risked everything to expose him. I could have stayed quiet. I didn't. The courtroom murmured. The judge rapped his gavel for silence. The defense attorney sneered, but I held my ground. When the verdict finally came, my breath caught in my throat. Guilty on all counts. David's expression didn't falter. Even as the judge sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison, he kept his eyes locked on me, his smile unwavering. As they led him away, he mouthed two words. "Not over." For a while, I tried to rebuild. The insurance money was seized, leaving me with nothing but debt. I sold the house, moved into a small apartment, and found a job at a local bookstore. Life was quieter, simpler. Some days I even felt free. But then the letters started again. Smuggled out of prison, somehow reaching me. Each one more menacing than the last. "You think bars can stop me? I still have friends on the outside. You'll never escape me, Emma." I brought them to the agents who assured me he had no real power left. But at night, alone in my apartment, couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching, still pulling strings from the shadows. And then one evening, I came home to find my door ajar. My stomach dropped. Inside, nothing was missing, but on the kitchen table lay a single sheet of paper. In David's handwriting, "I told you. Not over." When I found David's note on the kitchen table, "I told you. Not over." Something cold and animal quiet moved through me. My hands read the looping, familiar letters and felt nothing but numbness. As though the skin over my heart had thickened into armor. But the armor was brittle. The words cut through anyway. I called the agents and brought them the letter. They took it seriously, more seriously than before, and a team from the field office came to my apartment that night. Their presence should have been comforting. Men and women in plain clothes, radios clipped to belts, a low hum of professional competence. Instead, their arrival only made my life feel official in a way I hated, like a crime scene that would never close. "Can you stay with your sister tonight?" Agent Morales asked, his voice low and kind. "We'll have someone check your locks, and we'll do what we can to trace the letter's origin." I wanted to nod to accept the offer and vanish into safety. Instead, my throat closed and I managed to whisper, "Please. Don't let him use me as a target anymore," they promised. They left 2 officers for temporary surveillance. I slept, fitfully, at my sister's. Dreams of David's grin chased me through a blur of shadowy corridors. The next morning, James called with news. The letter's handwriting matches previous samples from David. He said, "We can prove he's still trying to intimidate you, which helps our motion to keep you under protective custody during the appeals. But there's something else, Em. Come to the office. I drove through rain-slick streets. The world outside smeared like a watercolor. At James's office, he closed the door and sat me down. His face, usually composed, had the tired lines of a man who had stared too long at other people's tragedies. "We subpoenaed David's financial records," he said. "Remember? He bragged about offshore accounts. That chatter wasn't just talk. There's a trail one we didn't expect." My stomach dropped. "What trail?" James tapped his tablet and pulled up a PDF. On the screen, numbers swam transaction dates, amounts, recipient names. On the same day the accident occurred. A wire of $520,000 was transferred from an account in David's name to a corporate account, registered to a shell company in Panama, he said. Then, within 72 hours, half of it was moved to an account in Singapore. I felt the floor tilt. $520,000, I repeated. The number was oppressive. Heavy, an entire future purchased with lies? Where did it come from? Insurance. James shook his head. The insurance payout was only scheduled for approval days later. This money came from other sources' investments, possibly payments for hush deals. We're tracing the chain, but it's messy. What's worse, some of the transfers list a recipient called L. Mercer as a beneficiary. We don't have a full name yet, but this could be a person involved. A twist like that detonated inside me. David's scheme was larger than I'd imagined, threaded into other men's hands and shady accounts. If his network stretched into international transfers, then the people who could hurt me weren't just a single desperate husband. James leaned forward. "We'll trace the accounts. The bank's cooperating under subpoena, but this means the case could open up to other jurisdictions, which complicates things." Also, he hesitated. "We need to be careful about how we proceed publicly. Powerful people don't like being exposed." My mouth went dry. Powerful people? You mean David had backers? Possibly, James said. Or maybe he paid. Someone off to make the transfers, an accomplice at a financial firm, or a fixer who moves funds quietly. We don't know yet. But this is no longer a small-town scam. I left the office in a fog of rain and numbers. The city looked different. The headlines that had once been about my tragic widow now were a tiny doorway to a larger underworld. Every man in a suit could be an accountant laundering crime. Every cheerful neighbor could be an accomplice. Trust, that brittle tissue, felt shredded. That evening, I sat with Sarah at my tiny kitchen table, the light from a single lamp pooling between us. She had brought tea and a resilience that often grounded me. We spread the latest documents out like a map to an unknown country. "So L. Mercer," she said, tapping the PDF with her finger. "Could be a woman. Could be an alias. Could be anything," I muttered. "But why $520,000? And why move half to Singapore?" "Because that's how you bleed a paper trail dry," Sarah said. "You move it across borders, through shell companies, then it's gone. But there are always mistakes. People get sloppy." She was right. People always make mistakes. That is one of the few mercies in a world of careful criminals. We spent the night compiling a list of names we thought might connect. Contractors who'd bought David's electronics inventory. People who had suddenly paid him large sums before the accident. Any odd deposits into accounts. I thought of the adjuster who'd called me after the funeral, pleasant and formal. I remembered the way his tone had been too practiced. Had he been part of it? A new message appeared on my phone. No name, just text. "Stop poking around. You'll regret it." My hands froze. The message had arrived at 1:17 a.m. The timestamp was unmistakable. It was the same handwriting of malice that had crawled through the letter. My stomach knotted into a tight, painful loop. I called Agent Morales immediately. "We'll trace it," he said. "Don't respond. We'll try to get a ping. Stay safe." That night, despite the watchful agents and the buzz of activity at the bureau, I barely slept. Somewhere beneath the adrenaline, terror had a rhythm. Quick, then steady, then nothing. The nothing felt worse. 2 days later, the bank slipped us another small mercy, a ledger error. A teller in a Singapore branch had flagged an unusual pattern as part of anti-money laundering checks. That tiny oversight led them to freeze one of the intermediary accounts. With it came documents we hadn't expected. A scanned contract, a series of emails, names attached to transactions. One email thread contained an attachment labeled Mercer Agreement to .pdf. My hands trembled as James opened it. Inside the agreement read like a contract between crooked business partners, payment amounts, deadlines, and a name Alina Mercer signed in a looping hand I recognized faintly from the letter that David had forced me to see. The agreement made mention of an operations facilitator and a fee schedule for creating plausible casualties. It was clinical and monstrous. They had spreadsheeted death. My world narrowed to a pinpoint. Lena Mercer. A person. A signature. Proof that more than one person had touched the machinery that put my husband into the ground. I had always believed the worst of people was private jealousy, mean words, petty betrayals that stayed small. I had never imagined contracts that priced suffering. People who treated a fabricated corpse as a deliverable. James looked at me over the document and said softly, "We just found a participant. Lena Mercer is either a name or the operator who negotiated the transfers and the paperwork. If we can find her, we can unravel whoever coordinated it." Another twist, this time a handle I could hold. I felt the first fragile spark of hope. We worked feverishly. The bank put an analyst on the case. The Panama Shell Company was traced to a law firm that specialized in anonymity. The Singapore account was handled through a corporate services provider that eventually named a director. Lena M. with an address in London. London. My breath hitched. The scope of this thing spiraled further out into the world across oceans, across languages. It made my apartment feel small and fragile, like an eggshell in a hurricane. Agent Morales arranged for me to speak with a London-based colleague over a secure line. The woman on the other end was brisk and efficient. She had a voice that cut through my fear. "We have a name that matches your document," she said. "Lena Mercer is registered under multiple identities. She's likely a professional fixer-money movement, identity swaps, fake death, dossiers. She has a pattern. We'll send inquiries. Stay put. Don't travel." I wanted to run. I wanted to find her at once and tear the truth out of her. But James and the agents were right. Safety first. You don't walk into a fox den yelling for trouble unless you have backup. The next reveal came from an unexpected source, David's parents. They had been quiet since their furious confrontation with me, nursing grief that had curdled into resentment. One afternoon, David's mother, pale and exhausted, dropped by my apartment unannounced. She came empty-handed, eyes red-rimmed. She sat opposite me, hands twined, and spoke like someone who had something to unburden. "They sent a letter," she said. "Someone sent us a letter, an apology, a photo. David," she paused, as though the name burned. "This man we buried. He was in on something, but not everything. There are pages of records. He left things in the safe deposit box at the credit union. He said to use them if anything ever happened to him." My head spun. "He planned it." She nodded. "He always had secrets." But I never imagined her voice broke. "If he's alive, if he tricked us, then I want to know who helped him." A twist from the most unlikely place, his mother. Finally, wanting truth. We went to the credit union with a clerk and James on speaker, realizing it was legally messy. He'd been charged. But his power of attorney over certain accounts still existed before conviction. The safe deposit box was small, but inside it were envelopes of documents, receipts, contact lists, and a leather-bound notebook with scrawled names and numbers. One page caught my eye. A list of 3 names, one of which read L. Mercer and a phone number with a London country code. I lifted the paper and felt like a thief. Those inked lines were evidence. Yes, but they were also a map of betrayal. How can a man I'd married keep such a ledger of the people who helped him fake his death? And why leave it where his parents might find it? That night, I sat on the floor of my empty living room and read the notebook until my eyes blurred. David's handwriting messy, hurried outlined logistics, staged accident near Riverbank Road. Tow truck pickup, 2 a.m., embalming arrangements. A note, cooperate with adjuster C. Mills. A last line chilled me. Keep M distracted. She's useful. C. Mills, another name. Another thread. My anger turned slow and consuming. He had always reduced people to utility. He had used me, lied to his family, and then signed contracts to hide it all. I called Agent Morales, breathless. There's a C. Mills adjuster. He signed off on the recommendation for closed casket. He might be the internal contact who rubber-stamped the paperwork. Good catch, she said. We'll bring Mills in for questioning. This could be the lever we need. The dominoes were starting to fall. Each name, each transaction peeled away another layer of the scheme. But with each exposed partner, the danger rose. The people behind financial violence often have options: money, menace, and reach. 2 nights later, David's name was in the press again, now paired with a slew of alleged accomplices. The media's appetite for schadenfreude seemed endless, eating on the grotesque architecture of a man who faked his death. Reporters called my phone and left recorded messages, some sympathetic, most hungry for drama. I stopped answering. Then the third twist hit like a stiletto. On a wet Thursday morning, as I returned from the bookstore with a bag of paperbacks under my arm, an unmarked envelope lay on the doormat. No return address. No stamp. Inside was a tiny USB drive taped to a folded piece of paper. The note read, "Look, don't tell them yet. LL Lena." My heartbeat doubled. I nearly dropped the books. The drive was small and unremarkable, the kind you could buy for $1. I took it to Sarah, hands slick. We met in her car, the rain keeping us private. I slid the drive into her laptop while we both held our breaths. The file list was simple: video_message.mp4. I clicked. On the screen, the grainy video filled the frame. A woman in poor lighting stared back. Mid-30s, angular jaw, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense knot. She looked raw, tired, like someone who had run too many kilometers with a pack of secrets. The file's metadata read, recorded 3/9 London. She spoke in a voice that made the hair on my arms stand up. If you're watching this, then it worked. David is where we need him for now, but that doesn't mean the game is over. Contracts were signed. People know. You need to know 2 things. Emma, because it's your name on those papers more than anyone else's. She paused as if weighing something. 1. You were never meant to be killed. You were meant to collect. 2. David was sloppy. He kept proof. He left a folder at his mother's safe deposit box, hoping you'd never open it. He wanted options. She fixed me with an unblinking stare. I, Lena Mercer, I move money for people who don't want questions asked. I am not your enemy. I am a facilitator. But sometimes people lie. Sometimes people, she inhaled, voice rough. He lied about you. He told me you were complicit. He told me to keep you close. That's why I left this drive. I can help dismantle this, but you must trust me. My breath hitched. Lena Mercer, offering help. The woman whose name threaded through offshore transfers and shell companies. The ghost fixer her message was both a bomb and a new threat. Why would she help me? And who had sent the driver, or someone trying to entangle me further? Sarah's hand trembled as she turned to me. This is huge, she whispered. I felt like someone balancing on an invisible wire. One step in either direction could be ruin. Lena Mercer was a key, perhaps, or another trap. I realized with a cold clarity that I had walked into a game far beyond what I'd signed for when I married David. The world of money and falsified deaths had other players, fixers who moved documents like chess pieces, bank officers who opened doors for a fee, quiet men who stamped approvals. I had won a battle that night in the warehouse. I had put a man behind bars. But that victory was not a finish line. It was the opening of a much longer race. The video ended with Lena's final words. "Get James. Let him talk to our people in London. But be careful. Not everyone who smiles is on your side." Before I could process the implications, my phone vibrated. The caller ID read unknown. I nearly didn't answer, but my thumb slid before I decided. A voice, low and metallic, said, "Mrs. Harrison, Miss Mercer told you to be careful. So I'll make this easy. Stop cooperating. Walk away from this, or you will watch the people you love be unmade." The line went dead. My hand flew to my mouth. The voice meant business. Whoever it was knew Lena had contacted me, knew my moves. They were watching. A knock at the door made us both jump. I opened it to find a woman in a long coat, hair dripping from the rain. She looked familiar in a way that made my skin prickle. "Emma Harrison?" she asked. "Yes," I said, voice thin. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry to come unannounced. My name is Lena. We need to talk." The rain fell harder as she stepped into my hallway. I couldn't move. For months, the name Lena Mercer had haunted me through documents, ledgers, wire transfers, and a ghostly video message. Now she stood in my hallway, dripping rain on the mat, her eyes sharp and unblinking. I should have slammed the door. I should have called the agents immediately. Instead, I froze, because something in her face, raw exhaustion, maybe, or a flicker of desperation, stopped me. She pushed back the hood of her coat, revealing angular features, her hair dark and plastered to her face. "Don't look so terrified, Emma. If I wanted you gone, I wouldn't knock." Her voice was the same as the recording, that rough, deliberate cadence, as if she measured every syllable like currency. My heart thudded. "How did you find me?" Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "I've always known where you were. You were part of the plan, remember? But I didn't come here to threaten you. I came because your husband's arrogance has made things unstable. He kept records he wasn't supposed to. That puts both of us in danger." I felt Sarah shift nervously behind me. She'd insisted on staying the night after the USB scare. Now she leaned close, whispering, "Emma, this is insane. Don't let her in." But Lena was already stepping over the threshold uninvited. She smelled faintly of tobacco and rain. She shut the door herself and turned, scanning my apartment like she'd memorized its layout before ever setting foot inside. "Where's the notebook?" she asked. My throat tightened. "What notebook?" She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "Don't insult me. The one David kept in the safe deposit box. The one with my name in it." Sarah bristled. "Even if she had it, why would she give it to you? You're part of this mess." Lena's gaze cut to her like a blade. "I'm part of many messes, sweetheart. The difference is I survive them. And if Emma wants to survive, she hand over what David left." I swallowed hard. My instincts screamed to deny everything, but my gut told me she already knew the truth. "I don't have it here," I lied. "It's with my lawyer." Her expression didn't change, but I sensed the lie landed somewhere behind her eyes. "Good, keep it there. Safer than under your mattress. But listen carefully. Those pages aren't just incriminating David. They connect to people who don't appreciate being in anyone's handwriting. People with reach far beyond prison walls. If they think you're holding that ledger as leverage, I'll never sleep again." The words chilled me more than her presence. "So why are you warning me? Why not protect yourself and let me sink?" For the first time, a crack in her composure appeared. Her jaw clenched. "Because he lied about you. He told me you were complicit, greedy, eager to play widow for cash. I built protections around that lie. If they learn you weren't, the heat shifts. Onto me, it was strange. The twisted logic of her confession. My innocence was dangerous for her. She needed me alive, believable, a victim because the truth made her vulnerable." Sarah crossed her arms. "So what do you want from Emma?" Lena exhaled, running a hand through her wet hair. "I want access to that ledger before the wrong people do. And in return, I'll give you the names David never wrote down. The ones behind the curtain. The ones who can bury both of us. Her eyes locked on mine. Do we have a deal? I didn't trust her. Every instinct screamed that trusting her was like hugging a snake and hoping it wouldn't bite. But another instinct, the one that had kept me alive through David's lies, told me she was telling a half-truth. And half-truths could still be useful. I'll think about it, I said carefully. Her smile was thin. Think fast. They already know about the USB. That wasn't from me. Someone else wanted you rattled. She glanced at Sarah, and next time. They won't knock politely. She pulled her hood up again, turned, and disappeared into the rain. I stood in the silence of my hallway, my pulse hammering, until Sarah whispered, "What the hell just happened?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. The next day, I met James at his office and told him everything. His jaw tightened as he listened, his fingers tapping a steady rhythm against his desk. "She came to your apartment?" he said finally. "That's reckless, even for her. But if she's right, if others are circling, then the notebook is more valuable than we thought." I leaned forward, gripping the edge of his desk. What do I do? Hand it over to her. Or to the feds? Neither, he said. Not yet. If Mercer really wants it, she'll reveal more. And if these others are watching, we can't risk exposing you further. We need to control the timing. I pressed my palms to my face. I'm so tired, James. Every time I think it's over, something else surfaces. Offshore accounts, fixers, contracts, now more threats. When does it end? He was quiet for a long moment, then said softly, "When the whole truth is out." And not before that night. I couldn't sleep. Rain drummed against the windows, the city humming faintly outside. I kept staring at the shadows, half expecting Lena Warworse, someone else to step through them. At 10 a.m., my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "We know about Mercer. She can't protect you. Hand over the ledger, or Sarah pays the price." My blood froze. I bolted upright, my breath coming fast. Another text followed immediately. 24 hours. Tick. I stumbled into the living room, dialing Sarah frantically. She answered groggily, her voice thick with sleep. What's wrong?" "Check your locks," I hissed. "Right now. Someone's threatening you. They know your name." I heard her shuffle, the sound of deadbolts sliding into place. "Oh my God, Emma, what do we do?" I pressed a hand to my forehead, my heart pounding. "We tell Morales first thing." But deep down, I knew the agents couldn't shield us from everything. Whoever had sent that text wasn't bluffing. The following day, Morales sat across from me in the sterile conference room, the note clutched in his hand. "This isn't surprising," he said grimly. "If Mercer's trying to cut a deal with you, her competitors or employers might want to scare you off. They see you as leverage." I slammed my palms on the table. "I'm sick of being leverage. I want my life back." His gaze softened. "You'll get it. But for now, we're going to place Sarah under temporary protection. And you don't go anywhere without notifying us. Understood?" I nodded, my throat tight. That night, Sarah was taken to a safe house. I hugged her fiercely before she left. "I'll fix this," I whispered. She shook her head. "Just stay alive, Emma. That's all I care about." 2 days later, I received another message. This time, it wasn't text. It was a photo, a grainy image of the notebook. The pages open, and a red X drawn over my name. Beneath it, a caption. "Final warning." I dropped the phone, my hands trembling. Someone had been close enough to photograph the ledger, which meant someone had gotten to the safe deposit box, or worse, to James's office. I called him immediately. His voice was taut with tension. "The box hasn't been breached. I checked this morning, which means whoever sent that photo already has a copy." My mind reeled. A copy? How long had it been out in the world? How many people had seen my name linked to David's fraud? The walls were closing in. That night, sleep eluded me again. I sat in the dark, the city humming beyond my window, when a knock echoed through the apartment. 3 soft taps. I froze. Slowly, I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. Lena stood there again, her hood up, her face shadowed. I opened the door a crack. Why are you here? I hissed. Her eyes glittered. Because you're running out of time. They've marked you. If you don't decide soon, Emma, they'll make the decision for you. My breath came shallow. And why should I trust you? She leaned in, her voice a whisper. Because I can get you out of this alive. But only if you give me the ledger. Tonight? She stood there under the hallway light like a storm in human shape, Lina Mercer. Damp hair plastered to her temples, rain still beating on the shoulders of her coat. By the 7th night she'd visited me, fear felt less like surprise and more like a constant temperature of the air. Always there, always heavy. I should have hated her. I should have spat venom and shut the door on the woman who trafficked in false identities and dead men. Instead, standing in the doorway, she had made herself at home across a dozen countries. I felt a complicated, ugly gratitude. She had supplied the only key wide enough to unlock a conspiracy that belonged to a man I had once loved. Tonight, she said without preamble. We go to the bank. You want the ledger? I said. You promised names. You promised help. And I'll keep my promise, she said. She moved into the apartment like someone who'd already mapped it in her head. But first, there's someone else you need to understand. C. Mills is a small gear in a very large machine. Take him down and you think you've toppled it, but there are financiers and facilitators who pull the strings. Her voice was clipped, businesslike. We have 36 hours before someone starts auctioning copies of that ledger. A new twist, another countdown. My chest tightened. We'll go now, she said. There's a safe deposit archive in the city. The ledger was copied. The copy was sent to a printer that bills to a corporate mailbox in East London. We have a contact who can trace who picked it up. You come with me quietly, and you follow my lead. No heroes. I hesitated a fraction and then moved. I had been living by other people's plans for months, first David's, then the FBI's, then Lena's. For the first time in many weeks, felt something like agency flicker. The understanding that I could be part of the action, not only the acted open. We left in separate cars. The agents watched from a distance, Morales with tight eyes, and James had refused to sit out the last push. He trusted Lena's information enough to be present, but not enough to ignore the FBI's presence. He brought 2 contacts from the Financial Crimes Unit. The whole thing felt staged like a movie, except the stakes were real as bone. The printing shop was a tiny, anonymous place in a gray block behind a supermarket. Lena knew the owner by a first name and an old debt. He recognized her when she walked in and paled. He produced a single Chaton invoice listing a pickup by L. Mercer and an address. Beneath that address was a phone number. It was a breadcrumb leading us deeper. We follow the phone, Lena said. Not me. You, Emma. You answer it if it rings. You pretend to be the anxious widow. It's messy, but it's effective. People let their guard down for a grieving woman. I tried not to tremble. The ridiculousness of role-playing, a part I'd already been forced to live, made my throat hurt. Still, I did as she said, kept my voice steady, a thin skin over coiled nerves, and played the part of the fragile woman who might be bribed or frightened into silence. The number led us to a postal box at a small mailroom facility. A man had picked up the envelope at noon that day. Security footage showed his profile. A slight man with an army jacket, a cigarette. We had a face. We had a movement. The footage also showed him handing the envelope to a courier outside a coffee shop 2 blocks away. The courier, when we finally found him, was nervous and talkative. He insisted he was a small-time delivery driver. He'd been paid in cash to bring documents to a client at a nondescript office building on the periphery of the financial district. He didn't know names, only directions and a license plate. The car was registered to a shell company. The license plate to a lease agreement that listed C. Mills as an approving officer. Mills, the small gear, we were closing in. At the office, the receptionist was a woman with tired eyes who remembered seeing a man come in with official-looking paperwork, but nothing else. The building's security register had an entry. Mills visitor 11:37 a.m. when we cross-checked Mills' professional signature across databases. We found a thread of approvals recommendations for closed caskets, expedited claim handling, and a string of unfortunate but consistent death certificates across that same narrow window of time. Men like Mills made a living smoothing edges for people who wanted rough things to look neat. "Bring me his files," Lena told the FBI analyst. "And keep the footage from being deleted." They did. They had to, 'cause Mills's files revealed the seam that tied the scheme together. An earlier adjuster's note in which Mills recommended that the family accept no viewing due to extensive body trauma, the standard phrase to hide bodies and beneficiaries who would be complicit. He'd signed off on the paperwork that legitimized the falsified documents. He was the person who'd whispered to David, "We'll make this look natural. No questions." We had Mills in a room with a mirror for interrogation. He was not. The man the footage made him he was smaller, balding, and suddenly very pale. When Morales brought him a list of his beneficiaries and offshore connections, his eyes slid to the window. Sweat beaded. "Mr. Mills," Morales said softly, "we can do this the easy way. Tell us who pushed you the names, or we'll show you what we have and the judge can weigh you in for a long, long time." He cracked. He named two other names: a mid-level claims manager at the insurer, C. Pierce, and an accountant at an international firm. Julian F., he said haltingly, that someone with the initials LM Lena Mercer had coordinated the move of funds through shell companies and had offered him more than his yearly salary to sign a few recommendations. He'd taken the money, he said, because his wife was sick and hospital bills had been piling up. It was greed sold as desperation. The human element in crimes is always messy. 'Tis always deeply mundane. There it was, the network. Not a mystical ring of distant, powerful men, but a knot made of people like Mills, afraid, compromised, corruptible. That, in the end, made me both furious and oddly relieved. This was not impenetrable. It was composed of frailties and lies. Another twist, when they brought Lena in for questioning. She did not present as the iron-fisted fixer I had met in the rain. She was tired, raw, but coherent. She agreed to cooperate fully. We guaranteed protected status and a negotiated deal that would keep her out of the crosshairs. Her benefit was substantial, a list of names and account trails that traced back to a very specific client, a wealthy contractor who'd paid David for logistics and then paid Lena to scrub the records. We had a name at last: Howard Greer. A face followed. A man who made handsome donations to charities and had started companies that smelled faintly of legitimate success. He owned property in 3 countries and had associates in finance and law who facilitated, legally or not, the movement of money. When the investigator sketched a target, my chest stuttered. Greer was not the sort of man who lost sleep. He had clout, lawyers, and a profit motive. Bringing him down could make a public case that would ripple. He would fight hard. He would deny and smear. He would make me look like a desperate wife once more. But if the net closed, it would be thorough. We set the trap carefully. Lena agreed to call Greer in a recording, pretending to be a concerned party who wanted to move the ledger to a safer place. The agents wired the meeting room. I watched the footage with a mixture of nausea and resolve. Greer arrived, cool and immaculate, with the demeanor of a man who knew his threats were effective. He did not deny the arrangement. He couched it in euphemism, logistical facilitation, risk mitigation, but the ledger's pages were talking points he had budgeted for. He didn't think about me as a person. He thought of me as a problem to be contained. And that arrogance was his undoing, with his name on phone records, with the transfers linking back to his accounts, and with Mills willing to testify to the approval mechanisms. The evidence gathered an ugly beauty. It all folded into a legal packet thick enough to be impossible to ignore. The trial that followed was not neat or cinematic. It was long and technical, full of forensic accountants and merciless cross-examinations. Greer hired a statue of a lawyer who argued that Lena's testimony was unreliable and that Mills had incentive to lie. He painted me as unstable, a woman getting swept up in a manufactured scandal. He tried to reduce the ledger to the product of a grudge. When Greer's lawyer asked me on the stand whether I had thought of the money, whether I had desired the relief it promised, I felt the old gravity of shame. I had thought of it. I had signed because I was in survival mode. I had wanted a future when I signed in trembling ink. That truth could have been poison or redemption. I chose truth. I signed because I was afraid. I said plainly, the words stripped of artifice, afraid for our survival. Afraid he'd hurt me. Afraid of debt. But when I understood what he'd done, not just to me, but to other families, I brought it down. The courtroom listened. Some faces softened. Others stayed stone. Greer's mouth worked like someone holding a secret in his throat. One more twist came in the shape of testimony from David himself. He'd been moved from the federal lockup to a courtroom holding with more restraints and fewer illusions. He had the look of someone who had miscalculated the world's patience with lies. On the stand, he tried to shift the blame to rattle off a litany of plausible deniability. He stared at me once, and something like recognition flared. But it was quickly snuffed. The same man who'd said, "I'm alive," was now pleading for leniency. Mills testified to the recommendations. Lena testified, reluctant, precise, infinitely tired. The accounting ledger revealed the cash flows with a cold clarity. Greer's defense was a last-ditch scramble against the slide of evidence. When the jury returned, their faces were unreadable. I swallowed and gripped the rail, feeling like a spectator in my own life. Then the foreman cleared his throat. "Guilty," he said for Greer. It hit the air like thunder. Relief and dread tangled inside me. Greer's world of respectability crumpled. He pleaded, but the law moved in ways that were slow but decisive. He was sentenced to years and fines and a frozen estate that would never be whole. David's fate had already been sealed by his confessions and other evidence. He was in prison for far longer than I'd imagined, and in one final display of malice, he tried to appeal. But the courts were not easily swayed by the sympathies of a man who'd engineered a corpse for profit. As the prosecutions trickled through, the ledger's pages were used to trace who else needed to be accounted for. Some names led to plea deals. Some led to indictments. A few names on the higher rungs did not appear in full. They were shielded behind layers of lawyers and trusts. But the net had closed enough to make the game unsustainable. After the courtroom lights dimmed, I walked out into the cold afternoon and felt like someone who had lost weight from their shoulders. The fight had been costly. It had mined me 4 pieces I couldn't get back. But it had also taught me a fundamental fact about power. It grows in silence and withers in exposure. Weeks later, an unassuming envelope arrived at my P.O. box. Inside was a note in a handwriting I had once hated and then learned to read differently. A single line. "You did what I couldn't. Stay safe." It took me a long time to place that feeling, that rose relief, gratitude. Sounds something like sorrow for the kind of life that eats people until they stop tasting fear. Lena's deal had preserved her from prison, but she would never be free. Fixers never are. They tie their lives to the edges of legality, and the edges always crack. Sarah left the safe house and moved back into an apartment 2 blocks away from me. We ate pot roast in plastic bowls and laughed at jokes that were small and level. I took a job coordinating for a nonprofit that helped people in financial crisis. I learned to count cash without seeing it as salvation and not as a tether to someone else's will. I went to therapy. I learned to sleep without anticipating the phone's vibration like an omen. Sometimes, when the city lights blinked in their indifferent patterns, I thought about David. Not the man I'd once loved, but the man who'd reduced lives to spreadsheets. I thought about his parents and their grief. I thought about Mills and how a human need turned him into an accomplice. No one in this story had been completely pure. We were all complicated, and some of us had used desperation as an excuse for cruelty. Greer's assets, partly seized, were used in a restitution fund. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. Compensation for a few of the families who'd lost money to the scheme, and a fund to help people with medical bills. Ironically, the very kind of cost that had convinced Mills to take the first bribe. In my therapy sessions, I told the truth in a steady stream about the message that lit up my phone at the funeral, about the night I met David at the lakeside, about the fear and the decision to risk everything to expose him. Speaking it aloud made the memory less monstrous because it arrived clothed in witness. One day, months later, I walked past a storefront where a woman cried softly into the shoulder of her friend. I thought of how easy it is for grief and greed to be confused. How easy it is to judge when you aren't the one squaring the monthly payments and choosing between pills and the power bill. The memory made me less harsh toward the men who had helped form the machine. It didn't excuse them. It just made the world less black and white. There were no fireworks on the last day of the trial, no triumphant music. There were only documents signed, sentences read, and a newspaper that dusted my name between columns about a scandal people were already starting to forget. Fame had never been my goal. Survival was, then truth. After that came the slow work of living. When I finally let myself stand in front of David's grave months after conviction, when the story had cooled and the headlines had moved on, I brought no flowers. I brought a small stone and set it at the head. I pressed my palm against the cool earth and said aloud, in a voice that was small but steady, "You do not get to define me." I left lighter. Not unburdened scars remain, but with the knowledge that the truth had been stronger than the fear he'd sown across my life. Sometimes at night, when a car door slams and I feel my heartbeat hitch, I also remind myself that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act despite it. It's the decision to tell the truth at a time when lying would have been kinder. It's the choice to find help, to accept the messy, imperfect aid of people like Lena, and the down-to-earth courage of people like Sarah, and the procedural patience of agents who do the work without parading it in the press. I had been the widow who received a message, "I'm alive," and that message nearly destroyed me. But in the end, it led me to a life that was, at least, my own. I kept my name. I kept my dignity. I kept my future. The ledger was torn into evidence folders, sealed in boxes that would be cataloged and stored. Many of the names it held would fade into plea bargains and sealed records. Some criminals would be punished. Some would slip through. Justice is an imperfect machine. But I had done the thing I needed to do. I stood up. I spoke. I listened when people told me what they could do to help. And in the places it mattered, people answered. On quiet evenings now, I sit by my window with a mug of tea and a book. The city goes by like something indifferent and generous at once. I think of the woman I was when I married David Young, hopeful, misled the woman I am now, wary, steadier, with edges carved by truth. I still carry the ache of betrayal. I still feel the phantom tremor of his first message. But the tremor no longer sets the rhythm of my life. I do. And when I walk past the lake where I first found him the phone lit up with that impossible lanai. Breathe in cold air and think. Sometimes a single message, even one meant to manipulate, can wake an entire life into motion. The wake is messy. The wake is costly. But from it, I learned to move forward in purpose. With my own voice and with a stubborn, growing sense of who I would become. The end of that chapter did not mean the end of scars. But it did mean the end of him as a presence that defined me. That is its own kind of freedom. Some led to indictments. A few names on the higher rungs did not appear in full. They were shielded behind layers of lawyers and trusts. But the net had closed enough to make the game unsustainable. After the courtroom lights dimmed, I walked out into the cold afternoon and felt like someone who had lost weight from their shoulders. The fight had been costly. It had mined me 4 pieces I couldn't get back. But it had also taught me a fundamental fact about power. It grows in silence and withers in exposure. Weeks later, an unassuming envelope arrived at my P.O. box. Inside was a note in a handwriting I had once hated and then learned to read differently. A single line, "You did what I couldn't. Stay safe." It took me a long time to place that feeling, that rose relief, gratitude. It's private. And something like sorrow for the kind of life that eats people until they stop tasting fear. Lena's deal had preserved her from prison, but she would never be free. Fixers never are. They tie their lives to the edges of legality, and the edges always crack. Sarah left the safe house and moved back into an apartment 2 blocks away from me. We ate pot roast in plastic bowls and laughed at jokes that were small and level. I took a job coordinating for a nonprofit that helped people in financial crisis. I learned to count cash without seeing it as salvation and not as a tether to someone else's will. I went to therapy. I learned to sleep without anticipating the phone's vibration like an omen. Sometimes when the city lights blinked in their indifferent patterns. I thought about David, not the man I'd once loved, but the man who'd reduced lives to spreadsheets. I thought about his parents and their grief. I thought about Mills and how a human need turned him into an accomplice. No one in this story had been completely pure. We were all complicated, and some of us had used desperation as an excuse for cruelty. Greer's assets, partly seized, were used in a restitution fund. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. It's compensation for a few of the families who'd lost money to the scheme, and a fund to help people with medical bills. Ironically, the very kind of cost that had convinced Mills to take the first bribe. In my therapy sessions, I told the truth in a steady stream about the message that lit up my phone at the funeral, about the night I met David at the lakeside, about the fear and the decision to risk everything to expose him. Speaking it aloud made the memory less monstrous because it arrived clothed in witness. One day, months later, I walked past a storefront where a woman cried softly into the shoulder of her friend. I thought of how easy it is for grief and greed to be confused. How easy it is to judge when you aren't the one squaring the monthly payments and choosing between pills and the power bill. The memory made me less harsh toward the men who had helped form the machine. It didn't excuse them. It just made the world less black and white. There were no fireworks on the last day of the trial, no triumphant music. There were only documents signed, sentences read, and a newspaper that dusted my name between columns about a scandal people were already starting to forget. Fame had never been my goal. Survival was, then truth. After that came the slow work of living. When I finally let myself stand in front of David's grave months after conviction, when the story had cooled and the headlines had moved, A&E brought no flowers. I brought a small stone and set it at the head. I pressed my palm against the cool earth and said aloud, in a voice that was small but steady, "You do not get to define me." I left lighter. Not unburdened scars remain, but with the knowledge that the truth had been stronger than the fear he'd sown across my life. Sometimes at night, when a car door slams and I feel my heartbeat hitch, I also remind myself that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act despite it. It's the decision to tell the truth at a time when lying would have been kinder. It's the choice to find help, to accept the messy, imperfect aid of people like Lena and the down-to-earth courage of people like Sarah, and the procedural patience of agents who do the work without parading it in the press. I had been the widow who received a message, "I'm alive," and that message nearly destroyed me. But in the end, it led me to a life that was, at least, my own. I kept my name. I kept my dignity. I kept my future. The ledger was torn into evidence folders, sealed in boxes that would be cataloged and stored. Many of the names it held would fade into plea bargains and sealed records. Some criminals would be punished. Some would slip through. Justice is an imperfect machine. But I had done the thing I needed to do. I stood up. I spoke. I listened when people told me what they could do to help. And in the places it mattered, people answered. On quiet evenings now, I sit by my window with a mug of tea and a book. The city goes by like something indifferent and generous at once. I think of the woman I was when I married David Young, hopeful, misled on the woman I am now, wary, steadier, with edges carved by truth. I still carry the ache of betrayal. I still feel the phantom tremor of his first message. But the tremor no longer sets the rhythm of my life. I do. And when I walk past the lake where I first found him, where the phone lit up with that impossible line I breathe in cold air and think. Sometimes a single message, Even one meant to manipulate can wake an entire life into motion. The wake is messy. The wake is costly. But from it, I learned to move forward on purpose, with my own voice and with a stubborn, growing sense of who I would become. The end of that chapter did not mean the end of scars, but it did mean the end of him as a presence that defined me. That is its own kind of freedom. Asterisk, my dear friends. If you found today's story dramatic and meaningful, don't forget to like, share with your loved ones, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next episodes. Auntie Leo would also love to hear from you. Please leave your thoughts and feelings in the comments below, or share your own experiences related to the story. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end. See you again in the next stories here on Voices of Auntie Leo. Wishing you peace, joy, and happiness always.